Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Legislative Matters Now with M&M. I'm Melissa Southall, Self-Advocate Coordinator for the ARC and People First.
And I'm Morgan Spicer, Special Projects Coordinator with the ARC of the Mid-Ohio Valley. Thank you so much for joining us. The purpose of this show is to educate self-advocates and anyone, for that matter, on the important topic of legislative advocacy. Now, every month, Melissa and I take a piece of legislation and explain it in an easy-to-understand manner and why it's so important.
We also speak to self-advocate in our Advocate in Action segment as they talk about how they are using their self-advocacy skills to help themselves or others live a more independent life, just like everyone else. To begin the show, we have a segment titled, Who You Gonna Call? Because when you have a question about a legislative issue, you want to make sure you call the right person so you can get the results you want.
It could be a city council member, a state lawmaker, a member of Congress, or an expert in the topic you're concerned about. For the past few episodes, we have talked about 2 of the 4 constitutional amendments on the November ballot. To find out which one we're discussing today and who we'll discuss it with, here is this month's Who You Gonna Call?
Welcome to Who You Gonna Call. Along with the candidates for various offices, there are 4 issues on the November ballot that, if approved, would amend the state constitution. In June, Melissa and Morgan talked about the amendment on taxes. Last month was the amendment on the legislature and the State Board of Education. This month, you want to know more about the amendment that would allow churches and religious denominations to become incorporated. So who are you going to call? A, your city council members. B, your state senator or House of Delegates members. C, your members of Congress. Or D, an expert in the field. Melissa, what do you think?
Well, there are experts in the field that we could ask, but since this was put on the ballot by the legislature, I think B, a state senator or a House of Delegates member.
Morgan, what do you think?
I agree with Melissa. This is a state issue, and we have spoken to 2 other state senators about the other 2 issues, so I'm going to go with B.
All right, Melissa, is that your final answer?
Yes, final answer.
How about you, Morgan?
Yes, B, final answer.
Let's find out. You are both correct. The answer is B, a state senator. As we have learned in the past 2 programs, while state lawmakers can approve laws, those laws must be based on the state constitution, and that can only be changed by a vote of the people. And so the state legislature put these on the ballot. The title of Amendment 3 is Incorporation of Churches or Religious Denominations Amendment. If approved by the voters, Amendment 3 would give churches and religious denominations the option to become a corporation. Provisions may be made by general laws for securing the title to church property and for the sale and transfer thereof so that it shall be held, used, or transferred for the purposes of such church or religious denomination. West Virginia is the only state in the country that still has language in their constitution that prohibits churches and religious denominations from incorporating. There have been court decisions that have allowed them to incorporate in recent years anyway, but it would be better if the Constitution was changed.
To better explain this amendment, our guest today is West Virginia State Senator Rollan Roberts, who represents the 9th District with his Raleigh County and is the chair of the Workforce Committee. Senator Roberts, thank you so much for joining us today.
Why, sure. I'm happy to be with you, and thank you for having me.
Let's get to the questions. Melissa, do you want to start with our first one?
Sure. Can you please explain the amendment and how it would change the way churches and religious denominations operate now?
The amendment won't change much of what's going on in churches right now. Churches typically operate as a corporation anyhow, even though constitutionally that has not been legal. When it comes to the churches, this whole story goes back quite a ways to 1863. We got our state constitution from Virginia, of course, when we split, and that constitution said that churches could not be incorporated. When it comes to incorporation, it used to be churches were very, very trusted, and they were separated out, and no one in that time would have ever dreamed of suing a church. But of course, times have changed. And right now, West Virginia sits as the last state in the nation to finally allow churches constitutionally to be incorporated.
How did this issue come to the forefront? Was this a request from churches and religious organizations, or something that has needed changed for a long time, and it just now was put on the ballot?
Last year, I had talked to the Senate and the Majority Caucus, and had talked to them before about it. But last year, we were able to get it on our priority list in December. And when you do that, you have basically what happens, for folks to understand, is the governor has his bills that he's interested in for the session. Senate has their bills, and the House has their bills. And so they take those three groups, get together, and basically the attorneys farm out what is going to happen with the different bills, how they will be presented, who will present them. And this was one of our top priority bills because it was kind of a no-brainer. It needed to happen. It's been needing to happen for a long time. It's Senate Resolution 4, Joint Resolution 4, from trying to get things going. We couldn't, had to wait till, I said last December, is December 4 last, and in 2021 is when it passed. And so now the next election, it's going to be up, and it'll help churches make the choice. The churches are not going to be forced to incorporate. Some will choose not to be. The church I pastored the same church here in Beaver, outside of Beckley, for 34 years. And back in 2007, we incorporated our church. However, even though the state attorney general had allowed that to happen, and many churches have, it's been kind of a little bit murky there. So now we're kind of cleaning everything up.
This doesn't seem like a controversial issue. Do you expect it will be approved by the voters?
I think it'll be approved, no doubt about that. I think it's not controversial. It's something that churches or denominations don't have to be afraid of. I think people in this day and time understand the litigation that goes on. A lot of times it's frivolous, and people have to be protected. In churches that are unincorporated, if they are sued, then they can go for the assets of the deacons, the board of directors, however they term it, the trustees, the pastor, the priest, the rabbi, the heads of the denomination, even down to the membership, if the lawsuit were large enough. And so all of those assets are all at risk without incorporation. Incorporation protects the people who are serving in the ministries.
We always encourage people with and without disabilities to get registered and then make sure they vote. However, they might not think this is a major issue that they need to be concerned with. What would you say to let people know that while it seems like a small thing, from your viewpoint, it should be approved by the voters?
Well, certainly they should be registered to vote. There are a lot of important things that go on. I would encourage them to support all four of the amendments that are on the ballot. There's been literally hundreds of hours combined that have been put in by legislators and council to get these things in line to help West Virginia and West Virginians in particular. This one is kind of a little lesser, maybe, and noticeable to a lot of people, but it is huge in protecting every single person that is involved in any church or any denomination in the state. They need the ability to incorporate without having that issue of being unconstitutional hanging over them.
Anything you'd like to add?
Yes, it's important for your viewers to understand that in 2002, a Virginia federal district court found that the provisions that we have in our Constitution violate the free exercise clause of the U.S. Constitution. And so ratification of this amendment would conform our state law to practice and also to the free exercise clause. So it gets more technical. I tried not to get too technical with constituents because I kind of lose them when I start turning those kinds of corners. But it is very important as far as lining up with the U.S. Constitution, also lining up with practice of what churches actually have been allowed to do for, I would say, at least 15 years or more. A former couple of attorney generals ago, they started allowing churches to do it, even though the Constitution hadn't caught up with what was happening across the nation. And sometimes we're behind in West Virginia on things, and imagine that. And this is one of those things that we're the last state standing on this one, and we just need to get it out of the way so that it's not a hindrance to God's people, and we can be able to worship without a problem and not be in violation of the U.S. Constitution or of how people are practicing their protection constitutionally in the churches or in our state.
And if people would like to contact you, do you prefer email, telephone, or traditional mail?
Probably most people are using email these days, but I get them in every way. I get them in all of the other ways also. The emails are good as far as the Senate is concerned. All you do is take the senator's first and last name, put a dot in the middle, and then go at West Virginia, wvsenate.gov. And so it's, in my case, it's Rollan, Rollan, .Roberts, Roberts, at wvsenate.gov. And I'm happy to get those emails. I get them every day by the scores. So people have to be patient. They have to understand, especially during the regular legislative session. It is not uncommon for me to get a couple hundred emails a day during the regular session while I'm attending committee meetings and trying to process hundreds of bills that are thrown at us at the same time. So I'm chairman of the majority Senate caucus, and so then I run meetings every day. We typically start at 7:30 in the morning, and we will be there until often 9. Sometimes we can squeeze in till 10. And we are doing nothing but talking about all of the ins and outs of bill after bill and topic after topic. It can be overwhelming. So I can fit in, and most legislators can fit in, reviewing emails in the evening.
When you do write, should you include a story to go with your request?
I think that certainly is a great thing to do. I would also say, because of time constraints, I would keep it concise and shorter rather than longer, because honestly, we often just don't have the time to read everything. You become a very fast speed reader, and you're skimming everything. You're doing it all day, and you're doing it half the night when we're in session, especially. During the interim times, it's a little bit easier, and we can process things. And I would say this, please understand, especially with senators, we represent, in my case, I represent 112,000 people. And you take that amount of people, and then you take the fact that a senator has 3 times the workload of a delegate, because there's 3 times the delegates that there are senators. And that is very important for people to get it and understand that we are wrapped up in lots of things all of the time, and we're trying to serve the people. But please understand, sometimes we can't get back to you at all, or sometimes we can't get back to you very soon. Also understand that in our world today, we have robocalls and emails and such. And I am telling you, in a session, I will get thousands of those types of emails and calls continually. And they come from these bot network things that one person is sending out hundreds of those to all of us. And you know what? You have to close or delete every one at a time. And I'm just telling you, it takes hours in the evening. I will not see my family for days and weeks at a time because of the constraints. And the only way I get to see them is I'm fortunate. I live a little over an hour away from Charleston, so I'm able to drive back and forth. But most legislators can't do that. They have to stay there. They're away from home, away from their businesses. And so just be patient. Don't be too critical, please.
We've been speaking to West Virginia State Senator Rollan Roberts about the constitutional amendment on the November ballot. Thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Remember, if you have a legislative issue you would like Melissa and I to explore further, please let us know. You can call the office at 304-422-3151.
Or you can email me directly at melissa.southall@peoplefirstwv.org.
Or you can email me directly at morgan.spicer@thearcmov.org. Next is our Advocate in Action segment. Today's guest is Katie Arbaugh. She lives in Cross Lanes, West Virginia, with her husband Josh and two daughters, Audrey and Louisa. Louisa was born with spina bifida and uses a wheelchair, which gives Katie a personal passion for advocacy. Katie has held many roles in the disability field, including special education teacher, service coordinator, and early intervention specialist. She currently works as a planner for the West Virginia Developmental Disabilities Council.
The council is the main funder for the People First of West Virginia program, and we appreciate it very much. Thank you for joining us, Katie. Now, although you work for the council, we wanted to feature you as our Advocate in Action segment because, as your biography says, you have been an advocate for many years. We would like to learn more, so let's get to our questions.
I had a great time in Partners in Policymaking, and Melissa and I have interviewed several students from that class. So what encouraged you to take that class?
Just to increase my knowledge base. I have a few areas that I like to hone in on, but I knew there was information that I was lacking, and there were certain topics that I knew nothing about. And so that class, it starts with history, and then it moves through a variety of topics regarding people with developmental disabilities. And so I just wanted to make sure that I knew about the issues. And I also knew political advocacy was something I had no training in and wanted to get a little bit of experience in learning how to do that.
Yes, I love the partners training. I took so much out of it that I could use for my job here at the ARC. So I was glad to take the training and take so much out of it.
Now that you have graduated, what did you take from Partners in Policymaking, and how are you using it in your daily life?
The biggest thing that I learned is how to contact my representatives. Morgan and I were in the same class, and we had another classmate who was working on the organ transplant bill, and that's to make sure people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, if they qualify for an organ, that they are not discriminated against because of their disability. And so she was very adamant that we contact our legislators. So that's what I started doing, emailing them. And then I had one of them text me, and it was very scary, but they're just people like us. So I think that's the biggest thing, is working in the public policy arena. But then also, I just learned how passionate I was, like Morgan and you, Melissa, and other people. And I wanted to do this full time. So the opportunity to work for the Developmental Disabilities Council came about. And so now I get to spend full time advocating for people with disabilities. And I also get to work on training people throughout the state on a variety of topics and also on their advocacy skills.
What are some of the barriers you have had to overcome throughout your life or helped others overcome in their lives, and how did you get through them?
I think the biggest one, as when you were reading my biography, my daughter Louisa is 5 and she has spina bifida and uses a wheelchair. So accessibility has been a huge one. We have the ADA that helps us access like public buildings, but other things are just inaccessible, or what is defined in the ADA as accessible might not be as functional as people believe. But I think there is a lot of good in working on some of those things. Where we go to church, the toddler classroom, which Louisa was going in, was upstairs. And I was like, well, we're just going to have to leave the church. But it wasn't like that. I spoke with them and then they rearranged the classrooms to do that. So really accessibility is a big one. Curb cutouts, doors with the automatic openings. Those are the biggest hurdles that we've done. And I also learned, through advocacy, you have to be well informed. It benefits me as I work for accessibility to know some of the wording of the law so that I can, when I work with people, we had to get a curb cutout at her school because the one curb cutout was where the buses delivered all of the students. And then it was like a 6-foot drop. And so once I was able to come back with the language, we were able to advocate better and get a better outcome than if it was just me going up there to argue with them.
Why is advocacy, whether for yourself or others, so important? And what can you share about your experience?
Advocacy is so important because we can't make change if the public and policymakers aren't informed of the issues. And I think people get caught up with advocacy in that we have to talk to our legislators. And while that's very important, advocacy is talking to your neighbor just about some of the issues that you might run into, or telling someone at a business how might they better can serve you. And just like my church example, so that personally impacted Louisa, but now we have another girl who uses a wheelchair who goes there. So that benefits her too. And now that campus minister has approached me about several accessibility issues as they arise. And that is advocacy. And so making sure, we're informed and making sure we just share it with others, whoever you come in contact with. When I worked as an early intervention specialist with birth to 3 too, just telling parents, that they can talk to these people, daycares, clubs, like the events in the community. It's not as intimidating as it sounds, and people want to help. And we just have to take the initiative to just educate them about the topics and things that concern us.
Is there anything that you think people should know about people with disabilities that they might not already know?
Actually, yeah, I think people with disabilities have been underestimated for a long time. I think we have the ability now to communicate in a variety of ways, not only with assistive technology, but people with disabilities have a platform on Instagram and TikTok, and we can use that to educate others. Just like this show is perfect. It is, accessible to lots of people around the state, and everyone has goals and the good things that they want for themselves. And so instead of, with people with disabilities, instead of being dismissed, I think now is the time for us all to join together to use our voice to make sure that people know what the issues are, and that, we have the ability to just talk about those things, and we have a lot more power now.
Is there anything else you would like to add?
Sure. I think it's really important for people with disabilities, families, advocates to get involved in some way. We have People First, and there are chapters all across the state. We have the Fair Shake Network, which is another good advocacy organization. You can also strengthen your knowledge through the Developmental Disabilities Council. Morgan just attended a training that we hosted. We're going to host another one in September. And these all help us advocate for ourselves in ways that we do know, and then in ways that we, do not know. I know supported decision making. I know Strive Advocacy is holding trainings of that across the state, which is very important. And then all of our partners host other trainings. So getting involved with an organization is just critical because one voice is very important and one opinion is very important. But when we put it together, we can strive and make really good, impactful change.
I agree. Definitely that whole strength in numbers aspect. The more of us there are, the stronger our voice will be.
Absolutely.
We've been speaking with Katie Arbaugh, who is currently a planner with the West Virginia Developmental Disabilities Council, but has been a longtime advocate. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Thank you so much.
Remember, if you want to be featured on a segment of Advocate in Action and are using your self-advocacy skills in a positive light, please reach out to us here at the ARC. You can call the ARC at 304-422-3151. or email me or Morgan directly. My email is melissa.southall@peoplefirstwv.org.
And my email is morgan.spicer@thearcmov.org. We would love to hear from you and potentially have you as a future guest. Unfortunately, Melissa, we are out of time for this month's episode.
We want to thank West Virginia State Senator Rollan Roberts for talking to us about the amendment, as well as our Advocate in Action, Katie Arbaugh. We really appreciate.
But that's all the time we have for this month. Until next time, remember, advocacy matters.
And so do you. Bye.
See you next time.